So I'm Kieran, and I'd like to start by just saying something about the intense interest for me of coming in to the development of this work at an early stage. Georgie asked if I would act in the role of mentor, which really only consisted of very focused discussions that she was very disciplined about focusing. It wasn't ever just, let's just have a chat. It was very particular issues that she was dealing with in the work and also in thinking about Pine Gap. And it started with some of these paintings here and then progressed through the video work to become, I think, more and more probing of a range of questions around the presence of Pine Gap here. So thank you, Georgie. It's been a great experience for me. So we're going to have a conversation about things that we have and maybe haven't even spoken of, and then it'll be open to all of you with any questions that you might have. So first, I'm going to go straight for this, the tattoo on Georgie's neck, which reads art. And it appeared in the course of the project, which is why I'm drawing attention to it. And it seemed to me that it was an affirmation of art is my way into this. Very much the case of not activism, but a lot of thinking and creating around this theme, which is an intensely political theme. So I want to ask Georgie to respond to that.
I think that was an ongoing conversation that we had. I was stepping into this project, I felt like there was a really strong divide in my thinking between art versus activism, and that's something that we spoke about a lot from the start. And I wonder whether maybe you see my tattoo as like, no, I've made my decision. If I have to choose one, I've chosen art, and that's the course that I'm going down. I think I've done a lot of workshopping through this project that it's actually not always art versus activism anymore. So I don't necessarily think I have to choose only one, but I know that art is the number one driver in my life, and that's what this tattoo is about, really. That when the amazing Alina did it, by the way, thank you, Alina. I think a neck tattoo is an act of absolute devotion, and it's something that art and I and the relationship that we have is so strong, and it's forever. So that's why I got that tattoo.
So what is that sort of crossover space between art and activism where you're not choosing? I mean, I always knew that you couldn't possibly claim that the work was not political. How are you thinking about that? And another, I think, a phrase that you use about your work is that it's socially engaged, and has been for a long time.
Well, I think I'm still trying to answer that question myself. Like, why am I making art about Pine Gap when I'm actively not attending any rallies or anything organised by the Mparntwe for Palestine group? So why am I not going there, and why am I staying isolated in my studio and making this work? And that felt like a problem for a long time, or like a confusion. But I've done a lot of mentoring and work with someone called Alex Kelly, who lived here for 15 years, and she's an impact producer. And she was really encouraging me to think not about art and activism as separate, but in actual fact, if you think about this quaint village, everyone's doing their piece. So there may be a shared goal. And expressions of that goal come out from the community in different ways. Like maybe someone will write a book about a topic, as you did. Someone else like Alex Barwick might make a podcast about a topic. And so this collective chorus starts to happen. There's people protesting at a site, and then someone has an art exhibition. So it's not to say you're doing it wrong and I'm doing it right, or they're doing it right and I'm doing it wrong, wasting time, but together we start to build this chorus of this shared conversation.
Yeah, I like that. I see my own work, I think, situated in that kind of continuum where it's we're in a community and, each making our contribution. I thought it was really interesting, though, where the AI conversations went to in relation to the political nature of the subject. It was absolutely refusing to answer anything with clarity when the questions were direct. But when it was given a creative task, like the scent or the poem, like write the poem over here, it became more truthful. And that was fascinating. You want to talk a bit about that?
I think it was actually, I started talking to AI when I was getting ready for you to come and visit my studio, and I had no paintings to show you, and I was really nervous. So I kind of figured out pretty early on that I actually can't paint from my imagination. So I had all these audio recordings of people describing these artworks, and then I was playing them through my headphones, and I was listening, and I was trying to paint, and I just couldn't put the composition together. So I actually turned to AI to help me as like a desperate attempt. It's like an artist's deepest, darkest secret, like genuinely turning to AI for help. And I just said, can you help me put together this composition? But then it's kind of addictive. Like they would show me these pictures, and then I started this conversation. I was like, well, can you make it more explicitly Pine Gap? And then rather than show you the paintings, I actually just wanted to show you this conversation, because its answers that it was spitting back to me was just absolutely censored and bizarre and kind of unhinged, and it really scared me. So that was the turning point when it started to become a project between Pine Gap, myself and AI, and how the three of us are having this conversation.
Yeah, I think that has produced the sort of most incisive single work, I guess, of the exhibition. Although overall, I think there is something very incisive about the way the exhibition amounts to a like radical act of seeing. So Pine Gap is spying on us all the time. It's the big eyes and ears in our world. And, what can we do to look back? And, do you want to talk to that kind of insistence on the way the work could lead you inside to see Pine Gap in a way?
Yeah, I think that's the crux of my practice, as it has been for a long time. So during art school, I worked in a slaughterhouse, and I kind of saw my practice as starting to develop portals of empathy or ways of looking or seeing into spaces where people in the Western world kind of turn their gaze away from it. Like there's these spaces that we actively ignore, like slaughterhouses, prisons, aged care facilities. There's all these spaces that are really highly controlled. Images that are generated of these spaces, they're highly controlled and curated. And so my favourite thing to do as an artist is to kind of mess with that in a way, or reverse the way that we're meant to be seeing them. So when I migrated here to Mparntwe, Pine Gap fascinated me as this. It's essentially like what you would call a black site. It's just completely hidden and not allowed to be looked at, and that's defined by Australian law. So I think that's my job and my practice, to find a way to look at that.
And by focusing on the artworks inside Pine Gap, how did you think where did you think that was going to lead? What kind of a story was that going to tell us?
Well, I didn't mind at all where it was going to lead. I think I was just completely shocked at how people would often say, oh, no one talks about Pine Gap. But the first person who I ever met who disclosed that they worked at Pine Gap openly, I asked them, are there any artworks on the wall? And they described this embroidery of flowers, which I started stitching over there in response to that comment. People were absolutely happy to talk about the artwork. It was almost like this slightly off angle, at which point that they didn't feel like they were being judged or their work was being judged or that I was trying to pry. But the fact that I'm an artist and my curiosity in the art on the wall seemed completely almost apolitical, so people would talk. So I just kept asking the same question.
And how do you think, where has it led us to now to see these reproductions of the work? And to see that Pine Gap collection as you describe it in your video? You might want to think about how it also relates to the work you've done all along, as I see it, about the way that people attempt to humanise these unseen spaces.
Well, I think that art goes on the wall of a space that's human, and it's for humans. And I guess I'm really interested in the art that's on the wall in particularly violent spaces. Almost like it acts like, what is that art doing in that space? So I know that hospital is a place for care, but it's also a space for absolute bodily violence and opening and spilling out. So like the art in hospitals is often there to calm and distract people from what's actually happening. Art in prisons, I haven't been to many prisons around the country, but I've been to all of them in Victoria, and the art is just like horrendous. It's distracting landscapes of kind of no place and distant horizons, often a mirror, kind of like this one, which is why I was really obsessed with that one as it was described. It's these really ambiguous landscapes of another place that's not this place. And I think about it a lot, like whether that art is just permeating off the walls saying, it's okay, we're still human and what we're doing is okay. I don't know. I don't know if that's why I keep obsessing over these artworks in violent spaces.
Another thing about these landscapes is that it very much brought to mind the work of the American painting instructor, Bob Ross. You were already really interested in him and had a particular context for knowing about his work. So do you want to talk about that, and also about where that led you in relation to thinking about other works in the exhibition?
Yeah, I've studied Bob Ross independently for years, I think because I didn't learn how to paint at art school, even though I majored in painting. I wasn't really allowed to pick up a paintbrush. So I learned a lot from Bob Ross just on YouTube. And I'm kind of fascinated by his brand, like the way he's turned himself into this... like he's a product in himself, the way he's got his hair and the way he talks, and it's really family friendly. Anyone can do it. It invites you in. It gives you this feeling like, I can do that. I can be an artist. And it just felt like the perfect vibe or feeling for this way that I was trying to present this idea of Pine Gap in this world that I was trying to create. Pine Gap wasn't secret and it wasn't hidden. It's this wonderful, family-friendly, very easy to digest idea because everyone's ethically okay with it. So it's able to exist as this commercial or commercially viable product with this, you know, I became the face of the campaign. I was trying to show basically an alternative, like what Pine Gap would look like if we just tried to sell it and make sexy money off it.
So it led to the paint by numbers to begin with, but then other extraordinary ideas like the creation of a scent. And you happen to have in your family a professional perfumer, but which made that more possible. But also a scent by its very nature is an invisible presence. So it was really quite a brilliant area of focus, I thought. You want to talk a little bit more about the creation of the scent?
Well, that was Mum's idea because Mum just heard me. My mum, Diane Mattingley, she's a professional. She designs scents, basically, and scents that have healing qualities. So when I kept obsessing about Pine Gap and what artworks are on the wall, she just said one day, I wonder what it smells like. And then, do you want me to make a perfume? And then she went to bed one night and asked AI, and she sent me the screenshots, and we were like, this has got to be a thing. Yeah. This is amazing. Like, that perfume is just frightening. It was perfect. But that was all Mum.
I hope you've all read the campaign that was generated by AI around the perfume, because it's incredibly spot on in a way for that mystique that Pine Gap has that's also so insidious. I think I might have come to the end of my questions. Oh, no. Yeah, I wanted to talk to you about, in your speech, you consider the legislation and a particular clause of it that you were made aware of that could possibly relate to the production of your work as, you know, breaching a legal boundary around Pine Gap. And you hone in on the key word functions. You know, were you touching on the functions of Pine Gap with this work that you were making? And it leads to that question as, does art have a function? And I think we've already discussed that indeed it has, in terms of the kind of socialising of the space where this kind of work gets done. Do you want to talk a bit more about your thoughts on that?
Well, going back to one of your first questions about art versus activism, I think when I was first thinking about that and trying to make a choice, or thinking of those things as separate, is really scary, because if you're choosing to not be an activist and you're choosing to be an artist, it scared me to think that, I'm doing this thing that's actually not going to do anything. It has no function. And that I was thinking about that, and I was giving space to that possibility. And then, I got contacted by the funding. I was really lucky to get some government funding for this project, which was wonderful. And they've kind of got new risk assessments in place. So they actually contacted me and said, your project may potentially breach federal law. But it was good because they did the homework for me. They said this is it's section 39 of the Intelligence Act, and you can't, I'm just going to paraphrase it, you can't share any information about the function of Pine Gap or how it works. So I was like, okay, I kind of flipped it to my producers and their lawyers, and they kind of said, if this was to go to court, the word here that's going to stick, you're going to spend days arguing that word function. So is the art in Pine Gap a part of the function? So it was just this amazing thing to have the freedom of going, yeah, my freedom here lies on the art having no function. So it doesn't do anything perfect. So I'm not breaching the law.
And yet that's also devastating. And we can assume that because Pine Gap didn't shut this show down, they have decided that art has no function. But I think they're wrong. They're very wrong. Apart from anything, just as you were saying earlier, the developing consciousness and thinking around its presence in our community and what it's doing in the world, the violence that it is perpetrating in the world. That's fundamental for us to become aware of that by every means possible. So, my last question is this work finished?
No way. No way. I always thought of this work. This exhibition is the first of what I hope will be many, and I would like to tour it around, but my goal for this was less about showing a final product and more about hopefully opening up a conversation with more people who might feel okay to come forward and give descriptions of artwork, so that I can keep painting.
And have you had any?
Yeah, I've had quite a few. Yeah, I've got enough of 5 years worth of, it's good. I'm set up for quite a few years.
So, would anyone else like to ask Georgie a question?
I think it feels, to be honest, like absolutely nothing. Like they are like, oh, okay, I've seen this image. Oh no, there's one artwork actually that people are quite emotional about, and it's an Aboriginal artwork. And I've decided in this show to keep it anonymous, which is it's painted blacked out over there, and it's sitting in the mess hall, like the cafeteria. But it's this really big, epic, beautiful Aboriginal artwork, and I believe that that's the only one that people really value. And then all the other stuff seems to kind of be this weird piss take, like they've just chucked it up to fill space with not much knowing what or why, or it's a cheap joke, or... So people are describing these works that they sound like they really don't like them. Yeah. No, everyone's kind of criticising them at the same time, like saying, oh, this is really ugly, or it's just a cheap frame, and, kind of like Kmart, or, yeah. Yes, I've done a few different things. Yeah. I've tried a few different ways, just verbal descriptions. Also little simple sketches, which end up look like quite simple stick figure forms, and even having someone speaking over my shoulder and giving constructive feedback as I'm painting, all of it. So there's a combination, like you'll see, sometimes there's 3 versions of the same painting. So it's the same painting that's described, but I'll try multiple times. So I'm open to any way of working, I don't mind, but I'm happy to make 10 or 12 versions of the same described artwork and work in different ways. But I don't really know what the goal is, because I don't think I can actually create it lifelike. I don't think that's my goal. It's maybe something, I'm still trying to figure it out, not quite sure. Yeah. It only happened with one work. So no other work seems like I can actually trace the name of the artist, but this Aboriginal painting I could, so it's actually got a plaque next to it. So what I did was I had this description, which it was described in immense detail, this Aboriginal artwork, and I was like, okay, well, I can't try and paint that. I'm not going to lie, I did turn to AI and punch this description in and then felt sick and stopped. So then I went back to the person who described the work and I said, okay, I want to know the name of the artist now. I'm ready to take a different approach. And I actually ended up like travelling out and meeting the artist and telling them about the project that I was doing. But through conversations with the artist and also conversations with Felicity Hayes, the traditional owner of the area of Pine Gap, it just needs that transaction and that acquisition needs to be kept so private because it's just it just needs to be private, and it's not their fault that their artwork has ended up there. yeah. So we decided to just paint it black. Let's just say they were to like charge me and I was going to go to court, I would maybe plead, let's just say I'll plead not guilty because the art that's being described to me does not contribute to the function of Pine Gap. However, my art's allowed to. Yeah. When I was working with the impact producer Alex Kelly at the start, and we had to really hone in together what's my ultimate goal, and one of the goals on there, amongst many different goals, was I would love for Pine Gap to acquire one of my works. Yeah. But...
Do they have to pay for it?
Yeah, I reckon. Yeah. Yeah, but I just went quiet then because I don't know where I sit with that now. Like, yeah, I don't know. I'm just going to think more about it. I wish. Nah, nothing. Absolutely nothing. Like crickets. But I've been spying on them. I don't know if I've been busted yet. Haven't thought about it a lot because it's too big a question. But I think that people who spoke to me had an interest in the arts. That was consistent. Like, they seemed to hold an inherent belief that art was important. Maybe there's like a duality existing where maybe they work at Pine Gap. I don't know. I'm about to say things that I can't answer. I don't know.
Yet another mystery.
Yeah. Often, as an artist, you have to think about who your target audience is, and you can't just say everyone, the community. It's got to be really specific. And I actually narrowed it down that this show, my target audience was Pine Gap, and so. Like, the reason I don't want to offend is because I actually didn't think of anyone in the room when I was making this show. And even though you're all here to support and hear about it, and it means a lot, it's almost like this event has very much been an afterthought because I was so preoccupied in my conversation with Pine Gap and I wanted their feedback so bad that I locked it as only inviting them in hope that I would be able to be in a room and have the conversation that I wanted to have, which kind of happened in a way, because I had my conversation because not one single person came, and I was like kind of flattered. Like, a lot of infrastructure goes into not allowing anyone from a workplace to attend an event in their own private out of work hours. I was like absolutely flattered. And the opening actually became a work. It was like not an opening that you guys would have liked anyway. It was like I was stressed, I was performing, we were filming. It was actually a work. That's the way it was. Awkward, wasn't it?
Yeah, well, it was very strange. Yeah, the performative aspect was quite engrossing, though, in a way. And I was a little bit shocked because I was invited under the VIP list, and I've never been so described. I slipped right into it. I felt like when I went away, I thought, oh, I wasn't even polite to some certain person. So, yeah. You might want to tell a little bit about your efforts to invite Pine Gap workers. You really made a big effort, and can you also tell us whether the invitations penetrated? You know that they were received?
Yeah. So first of all, there were two things. First of all, I was trying to meet Pine Gap workers so that I could ask about the artwork. And I did that by like tracking the bus and where the bus went. No, this just didn't have any luck though. Like, I was kind of spying on them and trying to find them, but that never worked. It just creeps people out. It only really worked through word of mouth. So once I knew that I had a show, I only had 3 people. I had conversations with 3 people, and that was enough to build this show. And I was like, okay, great. Now I've got to invite them. Like, I've got to get them to have this conversation. So I made merchandise. I printed like these beautiful silver embossed in VIP invitations, and then wrote a letter on letterhead and put it in like a professionally printed and designed envelope with my face on it. And I could afford 300 envelopes. I really wanted to afford 800 because there's 800 workers, but I was like, okay, I've got 300, got to make it count. And then with friends, like, yeah, thanks to all my friends who came with me, we just trawled the streets, like judging people's lawns, letterboxes, like, oh my God, they look American. Put it in. And then I reckon the turning point was on grand final day. I was out at Mount John's area with my friend Eddie, and we could hear this barbecue, and I was like, Eddie, come over here, I can hear American accents. And there would have been like 20 cars out the front, and I was like, let's go. I think that was the turning point.
And we can surmise, I think, that there was a very clear directive given to not attend. I don't think you'd managed to invite so many people and not one be curious enough to turn up if they hadn't been told you are not going.
Yeah, you'd just assume that they were told to not come because no one did. A couple of reasons. I wanted to pitch this to Araluen Arts Centre a few times, but couldn't, just didn't have any luck. And I was really lucky to, I had this as an early idea and then watched this space partnered with a program called Assembly 197, and they actually commissioned this project. So I had all kinds of support here. So I think it was a logistical reason. Yep. Amazing question. Does everyone need it paraphrased? Because I don't think I can ask it so well. All right, please excuse me because it was so well articulated. It was about how we know we now have ample evidence that Pine Gap is contributing data and information to help Israel in the genocide of Palestine and the dehumanising of Palestinian people. Why would I spend my time humanising Pine Gap workers? I think because, in short, because it's really hard and it scares me and it's complicated. That's why. But also, in a more complex way, I think that I seem to be in this problem again and again in my practice, where it's like I'm particularly interested in things where it's like take a stance, and I have chosen to not. How do I say it? I've chosen to sit in this more complex space than one that, you know, if I was to dehumanise Pine Gap workers, it would make it very easy to condemn what's happening. But what makes it really hard is if I'm to sit in that ambiguity of seeing them as humans, which I do see them as humans. They're our, like...
Why is that a priority?
Because I'm trying... Why is that a priority? Because I think it goes back to this language around my practice, which is not something that everyone has to agree with. It's absolutely not. Like, it's totally cool to be like, well, that's an absolute waste of time. But it's about making a different way of seeing something. So I do feel like everyone's got this, not everyone, but a lot of people have a shared goal of wanting Pine Gap to not be here, to close, to go away, to stop helping the genocide. In that shared goal, many people work towards communicating or like singing for that outcome in different ways. And I don't think it's any single, you know, you've got activists doing important work blockading, you've got journalists doing important work writing. I don't want to be the one to say that what I'm doing is important. I'm not going to say that. But I think that if I'm to place it somewhere, I think my work is less about saying definitively close Pine Gap. And it's a bit, if you're to look earlier on in someone's psychological journey of understanding Pine Gap, I feel like almost this is more targeted at someone who maybe doesn't even know that Pine Gap exists, which there's still scarily a lot of people who don't know. So if I imagine this work touring, it's about like opening up early conversations or thinking. Yeah, I think that that's an absolutely valid takeaway. Like there's every chance that what I'm doing here is adding to the conversation in a way that waters it down. So what you could argue is that, you know, we're trying to fight to close the base, and we're also trying to share true information, what we know, which is the hard facts about what Pine Gap is doing to contribute to the genocide. None of which I've even mentioned here. And that, yeah, could be seen as a massive problem. Like, totally, I can't, I just have to keep thinking about that and keep wearing that and keep hearing your questions and, yeah, thinking about it. But I'm sorry that I can't fully satisfy or say something that lands perfectly right now. I just thank you for your question.
I know you want to ask a question, but I just wanted to respond a little bit myself too, because I don't think that this is about humanising Pine Gap or promoting a mystique around it at all. I think it is about an insistence on us looking at Pine Gap, acknowledging what Pine Gap does. So it doesn't deal in that informational aspect about Pine Gap, but it does deal in the insistence on looking beyond the blanket refusal of authorities to be accountable at all for what Pine Gap means, hosting it on Australian soil, what the implications of that are for Australia and our role in the world. So, yeah, I just don't agree with the way you're understanding the drive of the exhibition, which is has the value of good art in prompting a person to think more deeply without telling them what to think. And this conversation, I think, is an important part of that, because we're hearing a lot of questions and trying to dig in a bit deeper. And your question is a good one, but that is the answer that I would want to explore in relation to that question. And now, do you want to say?
I just wanted to speak.
Yeah, it was interesting to learn from Jorgen just now about the Israelis dubbing their program Project Lavender. I was thinking exactly that.
I asked many times, so the question is about why the frames and why the colour palette. The frames are completely my imagination, so the frames are kind of repetitively described as really bad and really cheap, but I thought that my ultimate goal is to try and create these works that could almost look like they can exist in this collection of Australian art, or in the sense of high art, like with a capital A. So the frames are kind of leaning towards this gilded frame reference, in the same way that Frederick McCubbin's works or Tom Roberts' works would have been framed with the placards on them so that you can see the title. That's just a nod to old practice of gilded frames as amplifying the value of the work of art. And it was also like a way to, because people described the works of art as kind of so cheap and bad, I was trying to add value to them. And then the colour palette is, the only colour that I asked so many times, what's the colour of the walls in Pine Gap? And no one could tell me because they couldn't remember. So the way that they go into this space every day but don't know what colour the walls are is really funny. But one wall was described to me as being lavender purple.
I just wanted to add a little bit more to Jorgen's question, which is a good probing question. I think the AI conversations in particular are really interesting in terms of exactly the issues you raise. To me, it's incredible that large language models coming out of a supposed liberal democratic country has this built-in censorship, so that they won't even scrape the publicly available knowledge about Pine Gap that's there in the US congressional record, for crying out loud, let alone the various works of research by political analysts, of the likes of Des Ball and Richard Tanter, which is really serious analytical work based on very deep study of the technology and also the development of Pine Gap, how that technology has expanded, who the personnel are there, what their backgrounds are, which was what allowed them to pinpoint that it is a very militarised place, that it has this deep military purpose, and the large language model doesn't have anything to say about that. It's just, this is a classified facility, we just don't know anything about it, even to the point of we very much doubt that there's a swimming pool there. And but then some weird assumptions about people wearing uniforms. So I think it is very pointed work that should get people thinking.
You're not the first person to ask, but I do have really little interest in what art they make, and I think it's because I'm only interested in what art is chosen to be decorated on the walls of that machine. I don't really if that makes sense. It would be different if they, maybe someone did stitch the embroidery of flowers, and that's what, I do think some of the workers have made the works on the wall. That's what it sounds like. Yeah. Thank you. Thanks, Kieran, and thank you everyone for your questions.
Thanks, Georgie.